Welcome into another post-spring Power Rankings episode where today we'll be breaking down the top 8 teams in the Big Ten Conference. This is Always Talking Ball with Tyler Noe and Lance Barton. Do us a favor real quick. Make sure you're subscribed if you're watching on YouTube. Make sure you're following on Apple or Spotify. Check us out on social media pages, X, Instagram, TikTok, at Always Talking Ball. Our post-spring ACC episode did solid numbers, but my goodness, man. It really does just mean more in the SEC. We dropped that last week, and the episode and the stuff that we put out last week just took off like wildfire. It's May, man, and people are absolutely starving for some football. I know the Big Ten fans are passionate as well, so I expect this episode and the stuff we put out to be shared a ton as well. So do it now. Share it with your friends before it's even started. Lance, let's get right to it, man. Number one in our post-spring Big Ten power rankings, none other than the defending national champion, Ohio State Buckeyes. We went back and forth with them and Penn State, obviously, and we'll obviously talk about Penn State later. But for the Buckeyes, Julian Sayin seems to have the inside track, but I think they're making it a true competition with him and Lincoln Kienholz, however you pronounce it. But yeah, Julian Sayin seems to have an inside track. Obviously, they've got one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, like they do every single stinking year. Best wide receiver in the country, no doubt. Jeremiah Smith, complimented this year by Carnell Tate and Brandon Ennis. They got C.J. Donaldson over from West Virginia as running back. James Peoples is there. Man, they're loaded as always on the offensive side of the ball. They got on the defensive side of the ball, though, 3 returning starters on D, but it helps when you have the best player in the country on defense and Caleb Downs. D-line was their biggest question going into the spring, but they answered that with Bill Atkinson.
Yeah, I just we'll start there. We'll start on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously too, they're going to be replacing, arguably the best defensive coordinator in college football in Jim Knowles with Matt Patricia, who's coming over from the NFL. Reports are that things have gone well there so far with his early tenure there here in the offseason. But it's just, man, when you look at this roster, they are replacing obviously the most talented roster in college football last year. But it's Ohio State, man. They're one of the top recruiting teams in the country. They just, reload year after year. They have a chance to possibly be starting 2 of the most physically imposing edge rushers on the opposite sides of each other on Larry Johnson's defensive line and Kenyatta Jackson and Bo Atkinson. Atkinson was very productive at North Carolina when he hit the transfer portal in the spring. In my opinion, I think that him and then running back Jaden Ott that went to Oklahoma were probably 2 of the biggest impact transfers of the spring portal. Atkinson he was being looked at. It was down to Georgia, Ohio State. That tells you all you need to know about him. And Kenyatta Jackson is like 6'6", 255, 260. He just seems like he's the next one at the edge rushing position for Ohio State. We know that they, year after year, it's just the Bosa brothers. Last year with multiple edge rushers that were really good with Jack Sawyer and JTT. And it looks like that Kenyatta Jackson and Bo Atkinson are next up. And, Caden Curry is also really good as an edge rusher for them as well. But as far as, defensive, maybe 1 or 2 defensive linemen, middle linebacker, and safety, they've got, one of the best trios in the country at those positions. I know they're replacing a lot of around those pieces, but Caleb Downs at safety and Sonny Styles at middle linebacker, and just to mention, Bo Atkinson and Kenyatta Jackson, that's some great pieces to build around on that Buckeye defense. If there's any devil's advocate thing that you would be worried about with the Buckeye D, it's Jim Knowles.
Yeah.
Before Jim Knowles got there, I know we, had some folks for Ohio State that, kind of came at us when he made the move to Penn State, and we said he was the best defensive coordinator in the country, and that may turn out to be a little bit of when I say a big issue, no, Ohio State's got such good players, it's not going to be a big issue. But as far as winning a national championship, which is obviously what Ohio State their aspirations are and what their expectations are every single year with that program. Can Matt Patricia in year one will that defense be good enough, national championship level good enough with all that they're replacing the defensive coordinator? Before Knowles got there, I mean, the Buckeyes, if you remember, dude, they weren't like elite defensively, like for 3 years in a row before Knowles got there with Ohio State. Things changed dramatically when he got there. And like after year one, I think it was after the first year, like Ohio State, the last 2 years under Knowles was ranked in the top like 3 in total defense and scoring defense in the entire country. So it's, how does Matt Patricia, how does that happen year one? Dude, they're replacing both coordinators.
Yeah.
I mean, we talked about it last year. The best combo of coordinators in all of college football was at Ohio State with Chip Kelly and Jim Knowles. Now they're having Matt Patricia at DC and the star, kind of like I don't know if there's ever been a wide receivers coach that got more talked about, nationally than Brian Hartline, because obviously, because of what just year after year after year, the dudes that he'd bring in recruiting, and then obviously how well that they progressed when they got there. I mean, you could definitely make an argument that Ohio State's wide receiver I mean, that's definitely an argument. And that's because of Brian Hartline, the guys that he brings in. Brian Hartline at the wide receiver coach position, and then Larry Johnson at the defensive line coach. Those two guys are just elite recruiters with their position groups and do a really good job of developing players at those positions. So I ask you, I mean, do we not think that there's going to be at least a little bit of a drop-off offensively with breaking in a new quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
I don't care how talented he is. I know he's going to be extremely talented if Julian Sayin ends up being the guy. I mean, he was a 5-star, one of the top quarterbacks in the country coming out of high school. The receiving crew is ridiculous. The skill position overall, ridiculous, like always with Ohio State. But this is the first year that Hartline has been the primary play caller. I know he's had the offensive coordinator title before, but he's never been the primary play caller. He is now. Do you expect any drop off at all there?
Yeah, I mean, there's got to be some drop off. Like, you're going to a guy who's, like you said, first year starter at quarterback. I know he's got some dudes he can throw to who are reliable, who will make it a little easier on him. But yeah, I mean, it's the first time play calling for Brian Hartline. Offensive line lost a couple of pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And my question is Ryan Day, right? Let's focus on Ryan Day for a second.
Mm-hmm.
We've been critical. Everyone's been critical of him in the past in big games. All right. He got the monkey off his back last year winning the national championship. But in big games, we saw against Michigan, he coaches a little tentatively. In the playoffs, they kind of let it fly, but they were just on such a heater in the playoffs that, it really didn't make a difference how he was coaching. Do you see, does he continue to coach the same in games like that against Penn State and Michigan and maybe that Texas, that first game? Or because he won that national championship, does he coach a little like more freely?
I don't know, man, because I think the last 2 years they could absolutely lean on that defense more with how nasty the D was.
Yeah, they might have to put up some more points this year.
Yeah, I mean, I think the defense. Again, they still have the players to be excellent this year. Will they be a top 3 defense in the country? I don't know. Time will tell. But if they can't just lean on the defense to shut people down, will they have to let it fly more on offense? And I mean, again, they've got the pieces at wide receiver and the talent at quarterback. It's just, again, the quarterback position's unproven. I don't know that Ryan Day necessarily wants to just go into the season and let's just put it on the quarterback and start slinging it all over the yard again. But with a former wide receivers coach who's now calling the plays, Ryan Day, before Hartline and before Chip Kelly, was known to throw the ball more and not run the football as much. Chip Kelly was brought in to help out with, being a play caller that Ryan Day trusted, but also to firm up that run game. And that didn't happen until the playoffs. They were incredible in the run game during the playoffs and earlier in the season last year before they had the offensive lineman injuries.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know, man. I just think that with breaking in new coordinators, replacing so much that they're replacing on both sides of the ball, they're not that. Last year, they were absolutely the team going into the year that was national championship or bust. That was our show, every show that you would listen to talking about college football before the season, hell, they were even saying it, national championship or bust. This year, I know that's the expectations because that's the expectations every year at Ohio State, but they don't have the overall roster across the board that is just head and shoulders better than everybody else. They're right there now, closer with your Penn States and your Oregons and Georgias and the Alabamas and so on, roster-wise. But they absolutely are still good enough and talented enough to win it all, just like every year at Ohio State.
Number 2 in our post-spring Big Ten power rankings, speaking of national championship or bust, possibly, Penn State. We went back and forth with them for number 1 with Ohio State, but man, it really is kind of like 1A and 1B for me. I think other than wide receiver, because Penn State is obviously they dipped into the portal and they invested heavily in wide receiver and Trevor Pena, Kyron Hudson from USC, Devontae Ross from Troy. But obviously, Ohio State has the better wide receiver room. But every other position on the offensive side of the ball, I think they're better than Ohio State. Mm-hmm. I mean, say what you want about Drew Aller. He's more proven. He's got more, starts under his belt than any quarterback who's going to start for Ohio State. You look at the running backs they got back with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen, probably 1-2 punch, the best tandem in college football.
As far as production, they absolutely are the best tandem in college football.
Yeah, and probably a top 3 to 5 at least offensive line in the country on the offensive side of the ball. I think, and say what you want about James Franklin, but best combo of head coach, offense coordinator, and defense coordinator in the country for Penn State, right?
Ooh.
I mean, James Franklin, Andy Kotelnicki, and Jim Knowles. I know how much you love Andy Kotelnicki.
I do love Andy Kotelnicki.
And James Franklin is really weighing those two guys down, I feel like.
He kind of is, man, because last year that was absolutely Ohio State. But you might be right, man. I mean, when I'm just trying to think off the top of my head, OCDC and head coach. They might be there. I mean, if they're not number 1, they are right there at the tops of the country.
Right.
But that's where I really want to start there. So I think it's become like the cool thing to do to pile up on Drew Aller. It's like the people in the media, people on social media and things like that, like kind of like people for Coach Wise, people used to pile up on Ryan Day. It was it was just a fun thing to do. Now people pile up on Lincoln Riley and USC. And I just think it's become the like cool thing and like trendy thing to do to pile up on Drew Aller. Drew Aller absolutely needs to step up in bigger games. Like Penn State fans will tell you that. Any show that you listen to will tell you that. He has not been good in the bigger games. I got a few stats here for you. In the 3 college football playoff games, the Oregon game and the Big Ten championship game and the Ohio State game. Mm-hmm. Those are the 5 biggest games that Penn State had last year. Drew Aller was 54% completion percentage in those games with only 6 touchdowns and 4 picks. And he only threw for 160 yards per game in those games.
And I mean, a couple of those defenses, like Ohio State and Notre Dame, like just elite defenses. So, I mean, give him a little pass, but you're talking also, you throw in SMU and Boise State there, right?
Yep, exactly. And we know how, just booty that wide receiver core was last year. So that's what I'm it's twofold. I do think obviously some of it is on him that he needs to be better, but I don't know how much help he had at the wide receiver position. And then obviously the best competition that he played against. I mean, a lot of quarterbacks looked booty against Ohio State's defense last year and Notre Dame's defense. Mm-hmm. But I got a little bit of a comparison here for you that I was thinking about that just kind of hit me. You remember a quarterback by the name of Cade Klubnik?
Sure.
He had a first-year offensive coordinator 2 years ago in Garrett Riley. And in that season, Klubnik, former 5-star recruit, came into that year his second year starting, really first year as the whole year as the starter. And he had a brand new offensive coordinator with a new offensive system with Cheeks at receiver. And then Klubnik was pretty underwhelming that year. He didn't live up to the hype. He wasn't as good as what everybody thought he was going to be. And then year 2 in the Garrett Riley system with a better receiving core, Year 2 in his system, Klubnik was much better last year, significantly better. 43 total touchdowns. Now everybody thinks he's one of the best quarterbacks, if not the best quarterback in the country, coming back. This will be year 2 for Aller in Kotelnicki's system, with a legit offensive system, with a guy that knows what the hell he's doing with quarterbacks. And now he's got better receivers. I don't know that they're like the best receivers in the country or something, but they're absolutely an upgrade from what they had before. So can Drew Aller do you think he can make a little bit of a jump like Klubnik did? Do you think that's a decent comparison, how that went down with Klubnik and Riley?
I mean, everyone's expecting him to make that jump, right? I mean, you look at early 2026 mock drafts, and he's right up there in the top 5 with guys like Klubnik and Garrett Nussmeier. So he's got the build. He's got the, he looks like an NFL quarterback, right? And everyone's obviously going to point to that last throw in the Notre Dame game where he's, just not a good throw. And he had a lot of those, but he made some good plays last year. I mean, he's losing Tyler Warren, which he kind of just tossed the ball up to a lot of times, and Tyler Warren made some great plays. But
dude, Tyler Warren had 104 catches last year. Do you realize that is more than the top wide receivers for Penn State had combined? The top 4 wide receivers for Penn State last year on their depth chart had 99 catches combined, and Tyler Warren had 104 catches.
Yeah,
that's how good that dude is. Shout out to your Indianapolis Colts grabbing him.
Excited for that.
Yeah, I'm sure you are, man.
I mean, do we even need to talk about the Penn State defense, though? I mean, they got King Mack back from Bama. They've got denied Dennis Sutton. They just signed Amari Campbell, and just embarrassment of riches there for Penn State. So, I mean, it's essentially, am I fair to say, it's essentially now or never for Penn State? I mean, this is their best chance after a semifinal run last year. This is their best chance to get back to old glory for Penn State fans and get a national championship, right?
Yeah, this is easily the most talented roster that Penn State's had on both sides of the ball. This is the best coaching staff they've had on both sides of the ball. And this is the year that they've been pointing to. If you want to look at the recruiting class, for example, when Aller and Singleton and Katron Allen, Nick Singleton, Drew Aller, Danny Dennis Sutton, those guys were all in the same recruiting class together. And so this is the year that they've been pointing to. I agree the defense is should be nasty, especially in year 1 under Jim Knowles. I know Buckeye fans will tell you that apparently it takes 3 years to install his system. If you go look at the numbers, that's not the case at his previous stops. So I agree. It's now or never with Penn State. I don't necessarily think it's fair to use the phrase national championship or bust to them, but I'm sure that for James Franklin, he absolutely needs to win like the big ones this year. Like he needs to get over the hump in those games where they're a slight underdog or they're going into the game, like the Oregon game, for example, that they get in Happy Valley this year. Ohio State, obviously, like it's hard to sit there and say that you need to win that game on the road in Columbus. Like who goes on the road and wins at Columbus outside of Michigan? But I do think that James Franklin needs to make a run again in the playoffs, a deep run. And if he doesn't win the national championship, I'm personally not going to sit here and say that he's a failure because of that. But I understand that will absolutely be the public sentiment from everybody else if they don't win it all this year, but what they're bringing back.
Number 3 in our post-spring Big Ten power rankings, the Oregon Ducks. And Dan Lanning just keeps living the old peaceful life up there in the Pacific Northwest, bringing in solid recruiting class, bringing in the number 5 transfer portal class. They're going to have a transition at quarterback as well with Dante Moore taking over. Obviously, they transitioned pretty seamlessly from Bo Nix to Dylan Gabriel. So that's the big question is how will the transition be? We know Dante Moore is very talented. He played a little bit at UCLA a couple years ago in a couple games. He's going to have Evan Stewart back at wide receiver. They're always going to have really good wide receivers up there. Speaking of portal, man, they did some work on the offensive line in the portal, and they got Emmanuel Pregnon from USC, and then this Isaiah World dude from Nevada. Like he's already top 5, top 10 in some mock drafts for next year. Comes in to just absolutely bolster that offensive line. They got Mekhi Hughes, the starting running back at Tulane, and Malik Benson from Florida State. On defensive side of the ball, I talked about it, back in February with Dylan Thieneman from Purdue at safety, like just the leader, like probably going to be a captain on that defense. So it looks like another solid year from Oregon. Now they're going to be starting to be looked at as one of those teams. It's like, and it's kind of already happening.
Yep.
When are you going to get it done? Right? I mean,
Yep.
when obviously, playing Ohio State last year and the role they were on in the Rose Bowl, you were undefeated. I mean, they won the Big Ten last year in their first year in it. So, I mean, it's not like it was a bad year, but Oregon fans and pundits around the country are going to be like, they're going to start saying, hey, Dane Lanning needs to start winning some more of these big games.
Yeah, I agree. Last year, they at least, they beat Ohio State in the regular season, beat Penn State in the Big Ten championship. Year one of the Big Ten, win the Big Ten. But yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. Right now, they're definitely one of those teams that people expect for them to start trying to compete at the national championship level, not just win some big games in the regular season. They need to take that next step forward. And like you just mentioned, like a lot of the guys, roster wise, they obviously have the talent and the roster to be able to do just that. My question would be, if you remember beginning of the year last year, like their offensive line was awful and was a huge concern. And then they out of nowhere just figured it out, made a few moves, figured it out. And it wasn't a problem really going down the stretch the rest of the season. And so with bringing in heavy in the transfer portal, now they brought in 3 really talented guys that you just mentioned from Nevada, USC, and Texas State. Like, other thing with that is too, these guys have played a ton of football in college football. Like, all 3 of these guys have been multi-year starters and have played over 20-something college football starts in their career overall. But dude, Mekhi Hughes, you could probably say again that he's absolutely one of the best overall transfers in the transfer portal with whatever cycle this last year. And he was top 10 in the nation in rushing last year, rushed for over 1,300 yards and over 1,400 yards back-to-back years at Tulane. Obviously, man, in that Will Stein offense, we saw last year with Jordan James. I mean, they're going to run the football, and he's going to put up big numbers as long as he stays healthy. Noah Whittington's behind him. He's back. Noah Whittington's been the backup running back, it seems like, forever there at Oregon the last couple of years, and a solid 1-2 punch there. DeCorian Moore, could he be? We've seen true freshman wide receivers coming out of high school the last few years make just massive impacts in college football for their respective teams. Like Ryan Williams last year at Alabama, obviously Jeremiah Smith at Ohio State. DeCorian Moore was the number 1 wide receiver in the country coming out of high school, out of Duncanville, powerhouse there in Texas. I would expect in this offense with his talent, he's going to get a lot of chances this year to be that next one of that true freshman that can make a huge impact for a team. Dude, that Dylan Thieneman guy that you mentioned, Purdue, what the hell was Purdue doing the last 2 years, bro? You had Nick Scorton last year that transferred to Texas A&M. Like, you look at some of these rosters, dude, at some of the biggest like programs in the country, and they've got like random transfers from Purdue that you go like from the biggest programs in the country that these coaches of their respective programs that they're at now just rave about these Purdue guys. And then you go look at it like, dude, Dylan Thieneman led all Big Ten DBs last year in tackles. 2 years ago as a true freshman, he was 3rd team All-American and 3rd in the nation interceptions with 6 interceptions, 5th in the Big Ten in tackles, led all freshmen in the entire country in tackles.
It's not necessarily a great thing when your safety's leading your team in tackles, though.
Exactly. Good point, man. But for real, like that just tells me more about how just awful Purdue was these last couple of years. But overall, man, I mean, it really comes down to, for me, I think Oregon's going to be really good at the skill position like they always are on both sides of the ball. They're going to have speed to burn on both sides of the ball. It's what do they do on the line of scrimmage? They've improved dramatically on the line of scrimmage since Dan Lanning's got there. If the offensive line transfers can hit, I think Oregon will be right there. Do you expect Dante Moore just to be next man up there at Oregon and Will Stein's offense? Like, do you expect some dramatic drop off there?
I don't think it's as big of a drop off as like a Will Howard or Julian Sayin. I think it's I think Dante Moore.
Buckeye fans may turn this off.
I think Dante Moore's got some talent. He's going to use his legs a lot, so I think they're going to be able to run the ball a little more than they did with Gabriel. And so I think the rushing attack. I mean, I'm not worried about the Oregon offense.
I'm not either. Last thing on that, I think it tells us a lot about Dante Moore and what Oregon thinks of him. that they paid dude, it's Oregon. He's a former 5-star, one of the top quarterbacks in the country, was a returning starter at UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
And they paid him enough money to come be the backup and sit for a year.
Yep.
Last year.
Yeah.
So that tells me all I need to know about him, what Oregon thinks of him, that they basically just went ahead and paid him a ton of money last year to sit over there and chill on the bench to wait his turn. Now it's his turn. I'm with you. I don't expect a ton of drop off for the Oregon offense under Will Stein.
Number 4 in our post-spring Big Ten power rankings, the Michigan Wolverines. After a down year last year, after coming off a national title the year before, big question. I'll start it off right here. Do we think Bryce Underwood starts game 1?
I think so, man. I think the fact that Mikey Keene wasn't there for really much of spring ball that they brought over from transfer from Fresno, I'm sure they probably would have liked to start Keene and like bring Underwood on like slower, but like, dude, if he's the best quarterback in the room, he's going to be the starter. And like, I just can't imagine, one of the highest ranked recruits in recruiting industry history is with all the measurables that he's got. And obviously and I know his numbers in the spring game wasn't great, but he's still going against the Michigan defense. I think Bryce Underwood's going to be the starter week 1.
So if he's starting week 1, obviously they go to Oklahoma. We don't talk about schedules too much in these rankings,
Not
but
week 1.
I know Oklahoma in week 2.
Yeah.
So that's a big test for a true freshman quarterback.
Yeah. With a new offensive coordinator.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. And obviously the big storyline is them suspending Sharon Moore for weeks 3 and 4 against Central Michigan and Nebraska, which again, we don't have your head coach for a game at Nebraska. Like that's week 2 and week 4 at Oklahoma and at Nebraska. That's tough. I can't imagine. I mean, I don't care how talented you are going into environments like that when you have never played in environments like that before and you've only been kind of sitting in the stands as a recruit at those environments. Whole different ball game. Now they got Justice Haynes, your boy, coming in from Alabama at running back.
Very talented.
They got Donovan McCulley coming over at wide receiver from Indiana. O-line, I think, is still a decent question mark for them. I mean, I thought they would have been a lot more aggressive in the spring portal, but they weren't. So I just a little bit of an experienced O-line. So it really comes down to Bryce Underwood. Obviously, he's better than any option they had trotted out there last year. So that's already a given. But there's just a lot of question marks surrounding this Michigan team.
Yeah, there is. You know me, man. When there's some big coaching changes and at some of these bigger programs, especially, I think that can really make a big difference. I think twofold. I think the fact that you are, no matter who the quarterback's going to be, like you said, it's going to be better than what they had last year. I think the run game is going to be better because I think they got more talent overall at the top of the running back depth chart there, and especially bringing in Justice Haynes. Haynes at Alabama, they just didn't run him enough. He has not lived up production-wise yet to his potential. 5-star, one of the top 2 backs in the country coming out of high school. But he's the real deal. He's going to be really good at Michigan, especially as much as Michigan's going to run the football. I would imagine he's going to put up some pretty ridiculous numbers if he can stay healthy this year. But they brought in offensive coordinator Chip Lindsey from North Carolina. And Lindsey's history as an offensive coordinator and as an offensive coach in general has been, keyword, is what you want as an offense. He's been balanced. A little bit of a history of him. So he was a long-time Alabama high school coach at some of the highest levels at Alabama high school football. And then he got his shot in college at Southern Miss with a guy by the name of Todd Monken, who was obviously the national championship offensive coordinator at Georgia. Now he's the OC for Lamar Jackson, the Baltimore Ravens. And they set records that year at Southern Miss in Chip Lindsey's first year. Nick Mullins was the quarterback then, who was also his quarterback in high school for Chip Lindsey. But he ended up becoming the offensive coordinator at Auburn for Gus Malzahn. Eventually, Chip Lindsey did. And this is what I mean by balance. The first year that he was OC and the primary play caller at Auburn, they were the 8th team in SEC football history that passed for 3,000 yards and rushed for 3,000 yards in that same season. That was when they had Jarrett Stidham and Kerryon Johnson. Then, of course, he goes to North Carolina, and then North Carolina's first year was OC there with Drake May and Amari and Hampton. They were only one of two teams in all of college football that passed for 300 yards a game and rushed for 190 yards a game. So he's had a lot of success as an offensive play caller. He was cheeks as a head coach at Troy, being honest. Just wasn't as good as what Neil Brown was when he took over for Neil Brown. But he's not a head coach. He's calling the offense. He's going to be the offensive play caller. And I think that was a good move by Sharon Moore. Sharon Moore's specialty, I think, is going to be overseeing everything. Offensive line coach. That's what he's been pretty much most of his career. So bringing in Chip Lindsey, I think, was a really good deal for Michigan's offense in general. And I think it's going to be a really good deal for Bryce Underwood and his progression. I'm not saying Chip Lindsey is the best offensive coordinator in the country. I just think it's an upgrade there at that. And I think it's important for that Michigan offense because we know how bad they were offensively last year. Defensively, another one of those teams. We're not worried about the Michigan defense and Wink Martindale at all, are we?
Yeah.
No, not at all. They bring back I know they lost Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant, but they still bring back a ton of production. They're going to have one of the better secondaries in the country. Wink Martindale is one of the best defensive coordinators in all of college football. I just think that some of the transfers they brought into on the depth of defensive line, like Damon Payne from Alabama, was a former 5-star recruit out of the state of Michigan. Trey Williams from Clemson, one of those high-ranked recruits that was solid at Clemson, but just didn't literally live up to the production that they thought he was going to be coming out of high school. But maybe with the talent that those two guys have, Wink Martindale and that crew at Michigan can bring it out of them. And like I said, they've got one of the best secondaries in the country. So I expect Michigan's defense to still be one of the top defenses in the country this year, in year 2 under Wink Martindale. It's can the offense improve and progress, and more than likely what will be year 1 for Bryce Underwood.
Number 5 in our post-spring Big Ten power rankings, the Indiana Hoosiers.
Who's your daddy?
I bet a lot of people were expecting to hear a different team there, but we'll get to them in a second. People have been sleeping on IU a little bit because, they're saying there's not any way they can duplicate what they did last year. The schedule is going to be tougher, blah, blah, blah. We actually think they've got more talent than they did last year. In my mind, I think Fernando Mendoza is an upgrade over Curtis Rourke, who played phenomenally last year on a torn ACL the entire season, right?
Yep.
And O-line was a weakness for them last year, especially in those big games where they just got dominated by Ohio State and Notre Dame's defensive fronts and even Michigan's defensive front. Yep. They went and they got Pat Coogan from Notre Dame. They got Zen Michalski from Ohio State. So they shored up that offensive line with some guys who are playing at some solid schools and had a lot of playing time last year for those schools as well. They've got Elijah Surratt back, Omar Cooper, E.J. Williams. They're all back at wide receivers. And they went and they got Holden Stays at tight end, who's kind of a journeyman now. He was at Notre Dame first. He was at Tennessee last year. Defensive side of the ball, I think they've got difference makers at all 3 levels. You got Mikhail Kamara on the D-line, rushing the quarterback, Aiden Fisher at linebacker, and then D'Angelo Pons at defensive back, at cornerback.
All 3 of those guys were first team all Big Ten last year.
Yeah, D'Angelo Pons might be the first cornerback taken in the NFL draft next year. That's how talented that dude is. And we haven't even got to our boy Siggs yet. They got Kurt Signetti at the helm, right? I mean, guy's never had a losing season. He came in last year. He said he expected to win. They went 11-1. They went to the college football playoff, something just absolutely unheard of for Indiana football. So, will they take a step back this year with the schedule? Sure. Odds are in that favor. I mean, it's tough for a team like Indiana and a program like Indiana to have back-to-back 11-win seasons. Ohio State's, Alabama's, Georgia, sure. Indiana football, it's different. They're not expected to do that. I think their win total is 8.5. So expectations are obviously higher than they were going into last season. But I think they've got the talent to play well in a lot of these big games that they're going to have this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think that they could be a 9-3, 10-2 type football team this year, even with their schedule being a little bit tougher, obviously, than what it was last year going into the season, what we think it's going to be.
Which, if you look at it, I mean, 9-3, 10-2, we're talking SEC Big Ten here. they're usually going to get 3 or 4 teams in the playoff, right? So if you're 9-3 or 10-2, you're going to be in the mix. You're going to be in the conversation. And with the schedule that they have this year being a little tougher, playing teams like Illinois, right? At the beginning of the season, at home. That'll be a big win if they can get that. I think they'll be in the mix if they're 9-3 or 10-2.
Yeah, I agree. As far as coaching continuity goes, I'd be willing to bet that Indiana has the head coach, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, most coaching continuity as far as how long they've been together than anybody in the entire country. With Coach Siggs, OC Mike Shanahan has been with him since 2016, and defensive coordinator Bryant Haynes has been with him for the last 11 years. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And so it's not hard to figure out that every stop that this group has been at, a lot like the Kalen DeBoer and Ryan Grubb and that crew, every stop that they've been at when they've been together, they've been extremely successful and won at a high level. And Kirk Cignetti is now 130-37 record in his career as a head coach. And I'm sure it helps a lot that he's had the same offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator for a long time that stays with him. Yeah. And that says a lot, too, that group, Mike Shanahan and Bryant Haynes, are not going other places. I'm sure they've been, people have tried to poach them, and they haven't gone anywhere. They've stayed with Cignetti. So I agree with you. They've got difference makers at every level on both sides, on the defensive side of the ball, defensive line, linebacker, and safety, and corner. And on offense, they bring back their 2 most productive wide receivers. And I'm with you that Cignetti and Mike Shanahan's offenses have been extremely good and productive, dating back to James Madison and now at Indiana. And the most talented quarterback that he's had going into a season is Fernando Mendoza. So you got to think that there's not going to be some major drop-off from Curtis Rourke, what he did last year, an incredible year that he did last year. And you got to imagine that Fernando Mendoza is going to put up big numbers in this offense.
Dude, Rourke was a statue last year, especially in some of those bigger games. And obviously, after the season, it came out he had a torn ACL, so he wasn't running a ton, but he wasn't a big runner to begin with. Fernando Mendoza is a runner, and a lot of, the pundits out there you hear talking about him, like they are expecting big things from Fernando Mendoza in Bloomington this year.
Was it Phil Yates that said the other day that he's been watching some film on next year's NFL draft, different quarterbacks, and he came across the film of Fernando Mendoza and said wouldn't be shocked at all to see if he has the productive year that he thinks he could have, that he could be that guy that kind of, again, every year there's a quarterback that nobody talks about going into the year that could be a first-round pick. Phil Yates is out here saying that he thinks that possibly could be. I see you smiling. I know what you're smiling
That's
about.
Pretty bold of Field Yates to say that because you don't want to go predicting stuff like that and then get it wrong.
No, you don't. I learned my lesson last year of that. And I'm not predicting that, by the way. I'm not going to do that again. But I do think that Fernando Mendoza can be really good. And you just mentioned about his legs. Dude, I went back and, we're pretty maniacal about college football here. Obviously, we do a podcast about it. I watched quite a bit of film on Fernando Mendoza as far as his highlights and went and watched different things of him in different games and the bigger games that Cal played in, like the Miami game, for example. And dude, the thing that jumped off, the number one thing, obviously he's got arm talent. Okay. And he's like 6'5", 225. I mean, all of those measurables and his arm talent are great. What really jumped off the page for me was, dude, it seemed like every single play in the highlight film, he's avoiding rushers. He's in the pocket, maneuvering around in the pocket, and making rushers miss and making throws down the field. And then if somebody's not there, like you said, he can take off and run, and he's very, very good with his feet at the 6'5". He's not going to run a 4.2, 4.3 40, but he is good enough with his legs to make people miss, extend plays in the pocket, which obviously Indiana needed bad last year in those bigger games. And the Maple Missile couldn't do it from the pocket last year. So, I just think that people have in their head that Indiana last year got their cheeks clapped by Ohio State, and really Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame didn't kill them, but that was a mismatch.
The two teams that played for the national championship. That's it.
Exactly. And I just think that it's almost they've got and they had a weaker schedule. I think they're kind of getting knocked a little bit they're not the darling anymore. They were the darling. You talked about this a lot last year at the end of the year. they were everybody's favorite story to talk about until they started stealing some college football playoff
Mhm.
spots. And then they weren't everybody's favorite story anymore.
Yeah.
And then when Coach Siggs went on College Game Day and did what Coach Siggs does, that rubbed some people the wrong way, I freaking love it. If I was a player that played for Coach Siggs, I'd be all about it. That guy believes in me and believes in our team and believes in what he's doing. So, yeah, I'm fine with where we have Indiana right here. And I'm sure, like you said, the team that we're about to talk about now, most people would probably have ahead of them from a power ranking perspective going into the season.
Number 6 in our post-spring Big Ten power rankings, the Illinois Illini. We're lower on them than most. Okay. I mean, we've seen a lot. We've seen him as high as number 8 in like post-spring top 25s. I mean, really no lower than like 13, 14, 15. So they've got it. They do have a ton of returning production, but let me ask you a question. Who
Go ahead.
was the most experienced offensive line in the country heading into last season? You remember we talked about this a lot.
LSU.
LSU, yeah, but I'm thinking of Oklahoma State.
Oh, yes. You're right. They had like a bunch of 6th and 7th year seniors last year at Oklahoma State.
And I'll never forget what old Doug Barton told us. He said, that's fine. That's great. They got all that experience, but maybe they're still in college because they're not nearly good enough to go pro or to transfer anywhere else, right?
Yeah.
Maybe these dudes at Illinois, I'm not making accusations. Illinois fans, calm down. Maybe they're average players, like they're good college players, but they're not difference makers that are going to win you ball games and get you to that upper tier of the Big Ten. Now, a solid case could be made, right? Am I wrong here? A solid case could be made. Is Luke Altmaier the best quarterback in the Big Ten?
He could be. As far as returning production going into the year, he could be. I mean, I know that we talked about this kind of a couple months ago, and we were talking about who's the best quarterback in the Big Ten from a returning production standpoint going into the season. You know, some people said it was Altmaier, some people said it was Aller. Depending on what you look, some people said it was possibly even Fernando Mendoza. But Altmaier's really good, man. He's been solid as a rock for Illinois. That was a huge get that they got, man, getting him from Ole Miss. I love, too, that they talked about that there were a few SEC programs that were coming after him hard this offseason, trying to get him to transfer, and he said absolutely not. That he was sticking with his boy Burt and sticking with the Fighting Illini. And I love Luke Altmaier. I love his toughness. That performance he had in Nebraska on the road on that Friday night, dude's just tough as nails, man. And accurate as can be, he was a quarterback. I think he could have a big year for them, obviously. And the fact that you said he's got all the returning production that he's going to have just on the offensive line, I mean,
they are losing some production at wide receiver, though.
They are. And they lost Josh McCray, their top running back, to Georgia. So skill position wise, they did lose some. They did. He's got his big uglies up front that are going to be back.
Caden Fagan's back at running back.
Yep. But from an overall talent perspective around him, he did lose some. I like what they added in Hudson Clement, wide receiver from West Virginia.
Yep.
Most people, if you're a one of those guys that just loves to watch every single bowl game that there is, like we like to do, we like to throw a little change on some of these bowl games. The dude went off in their bowl game. He had like 11 catches, like 170 yards receiving in the bowl game against Memphis. So I'm sure he'll be solid for Illinois this year. I think what jumped off the page for me when my study here, man, on the Illini was the fact that obviously this goes back to Burt Bielema, how well coached the Fighting Illini are, is they were 5-1 last year in one possession games. And dude, their lack of mistakes. They didn't turn the ball over a lot. They forced turnovers. They're ranked pretty high in like lack of penalties. They weren't very penalized. So when you don't turn the football over, when you're not racking up a bunch of penalties, and that helps when in one-score games.
Yeah.
That doesn't shock me that they were 5-1 in one-score games last year.
Yeah, I hate to do it. Just consider me skeptical on Illinois this year because it seems, if you remember a couple of years ago, everybody was high on Texas Tech, right? That was the team. They were. I'm starting to get that vibe from them, and if 5-1 in one-score games, that kind of can throw some red flags too. Like if a couple of those go a different way, your record looks a little worse last year. We watched them against Penn State last year, weren't competitive at all. And then nobody
Oregon.
even talks about this, that one of those one-score games they won was against Purdue, like 50-49 or something like that in overtime. And, that's just that it gives me red flags for the Illini this season. But, I mean, we've talked about it. Bielema, such a better fit at a school like Illinois, kind of like Wisconsin, but than he was at Arkansas.
Yep, agree 100%. I think that obviously, if you're an Illini fan listening to this, you got to be ecstatic, man, that going into the season, all these rankings that you see coming
Yeah.
out. But obviously, man, I'm with you. I'm with you. I'm a little skeptical about them too.
Yeah.
Like I know they've got a lot of returning production, but you hit the nail on the head there. Normally, you see teams that one-score games. They have so many one-score games one year that, I mean, we're talking about just one or two plays are the difference in the outcomes of the games like that.
Yeah.
If one or two plays go a different way, then that's obviously, like, we're not talking about Illinois right now being one of those like top 20, top 15 type teams like a lot of these different services have. But I do believe in Bielema. I'm pulling for him, man. I think it's awesome that the Illini and Bielema's doing what he's doing there.
You'll pull for him until it affects Bama in the CFP rankings.
Maybe so, man.
Yeah.
Maybe so. But I do like what they have in returning production standpoint. I love Luke Altmaier. I think the defense is going to be fine. That was one of the things that they drastically changed last year from the previous year. The defense was much better last year. They returned almost all of their production in the secondary from that defense that they had last year. I mean, if you ask an Illinois fan right now, let me ask you this. Do you think if you ask like a normal, just sane Illinois fan, 8-4, would you be happy with that? Do you think that they would say yes?
I think they would. Knowing their track record, obviously similar to, they've had better success historically than Indiana, obviously, but past decade or so, it hasn't been bright in Champaign. I think they would take 8-4. I mean, they've got a couple of tough games, in the first month at Duke and at Indiana. So I think they would take 8-4. But again, the hype train keeps rolling in the offseason. And the more hype they get, those not sane Illinois fans are going to somehow be disappointed with an 8-4 season.
Yeah, they'll be disappointed with 8-4 or 9-3.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, by the way, they're absolutely good enough this year from a returning production standpoint, coaching staff, and the quarterback position to be 8-4, 9-3, or maybe even 10-2 in a playoff. I mean, you don't think that they are that, but I do see why people are saying that from their schedule perspective and what they are returning from a production standpoint.
Number 7 in our post-spring power rankings for the Big Ten Conference, the USC Trojans. Let's go ahead and kick this one off with a bang. What kind of year is this for Lincoln Riley? Do you think he is on the hot seat at all?
I do not. And the reason why I don't think that is because I know that USC is being a private school, like the contract for Lincoln Riley isn't necessarily like made public, but people that have talked about it that have seen it before said that it was a fully guaranteed contract. I don't have the numbers right here in front of me, but let me just tell you, it's a lot of millions of dollars.
I believe it's 9 figures, right?
Yeah, it's a lot of money that they would owe him if they were to fire him. And I just don't know, man, that like if you hit the full reset button after this year, I think that sets you back even further. I just do.
Well, and also look at what they got coming in 2026 already. He's already got the number 1 class, according to 247 Sports, for recruiting. So he's doing it on the recruiting trail, and obviously they're bringing in transfers as well.
Yep, and I'm gonna say this with my chest, man. I'm not a USC fan. I'm not some huge Lincoln Riley fan or anything like that, but I'm going to say this with my chest. I think of all the teams that we've power ranked so far in any of the conferences, the one that we're the most wrong about is USC. I think that USC is going to be a lot better this year. We talked about Illinois a minute ago being 5-1 in one possession games. USC was on the flip side of that last year, and 5 of their 6 losses last year were by one possession. Not only one possession, 5 of their 6 losses last year were by an average margin of 3.8 points per game. and they had one of the toughest schedules in the entire country last year. And Riley hit the reset button on the defensive side of the ball, which he absolutely needed to. But we talked about this last year, man, going into the season, that it would pay dividends down the road, and down the road is now for this defense. D'Anton Lynn might have been arguably the best hire of the offseason last year for one of your top-tiered programs because of how badly USC's defense needed a change of like a face of calling that defense. And D'Anton Lynn, what he did at UCLA before that was just remarkable. But, dude, I know that nobody's going to sit here and talk about how great USC's defense last year, and you shouldn't. But we do need to talk about how USC's defense did take a pretty substantial leap forward year over year. They were 117th in points allowed in 2023, and they were 56th last year. That is a dramatic jump year over year. So if they take a small leap forward this year, you know Lincoln Riley's offenses are going to be really good. And I think year two of Jaden Mayava being he's the man now. This is his team. Going into the year, he knows he's the starter. He's getting all the starter reps. He's kind of more of that dual threat ability that we've seen Lincoln Riley have more success with over his career. And I don't think anybody's worried about a Lincoln Riley offense going into the season. I know I'm not. But I think Mayava may be one of those guys that we're all going to talk about all these quarterbacks, and we're going to talk about Drew Aller. We're going to talk about the Luke Altmaiers. We're going to talk about Dante Moore. We're going to talk about the Julian Sayans. And at the end of the year, we're going to look at the stat sheet for quarterbacks in the Big Ten. And if Jade Mayava stays healthy for the entire year, don't be shocked if he's one of the leaders in multiple categories in the Big Ten because he's running Lincoln Riley's offense.
Yeah. Yeah, he showed flashes last year for sure. I mean, he threw for over 300 yards against Notre Dame. They lost.
He's got his two.
Right. They lost Zachariah Branch, Deuce Robinson, but they get Jacoby Lane and Mekhi Lemon back. So,
which was their two leading receivers last year.
Yeah, there's some continuity there. And like you said, man, yeah, the big question is, does the defense take another step this year? But you mentioned the 5 one-score losses. It kind of works in the opposite way with the 5 one-score wins that they had too, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, they were close to being catastrophic, just a catastrophic season last year, but they were also really close to that looking a lot different last year. I mean, they lost in overtime to Penn State. You know, they lost on the road in that. I don't know how they lost that game on the road at Michigan last year in the Big House. You remember that one?
Minnesota.
Yep, Minnesota. Like just crazy. Like the deal at Maryland was one of the wildest fourth quarters you'll ever see.
Yeah.
That happened there in Old College Park. I love what they did, man, at the running back position. Like, I just like some of the players, man, that they've got. Like, it's like guys that are like here to like prove themselves. You think of USC as like the NIL darling, the flash of LA and stuff. But a guy like Jaden Mayava, like he's here trying to prove himself at the highest level. Your Jacoby Lanes and Mekhi Lemons were not household names that proved themselves last year that are still trying to prove themselves. Their guy that's listed on the top of the depth chart right now at tailback was the Wayman Jordan was the first team All-American in junior college last year, the number 1 ranked running back in JUCO last year for the JUCO national champs for Hutchinson Community College out of Kansas. And they brought in Eli Sanders, who rushed for over 1,000 yards for our boy Bronco Mendenhall at New Mex last year. Averaged over 7 yards per carry. And you're thinking like, golly, that from New Mex. He's also a former 4-star recruit coming out of high school. Went to Iowa State first. Obviously, Iowa State had a little bit of a jumble there at the time with their running back depth chart. So then he went somewhere where he could play for Bronco Mendenhall and had a big year. And he parlayed that and now being one of the top 2 tailbacks on the depth chart for USC. But it's all going to fall on the defense, man. You said it. Can D'Anton Lynn and this USC defense take a step forward this year? And can they be better in these one-score games? I think the USC will take a step forward this year. I'm not saying USC some national championship contender, but would it shock you if we're sitting here in November and last year we talked about this. There were still like 30-something teams going into the first week of November that you were putting that awesome graphic out of all the teams that were still in playoff contention. Will it shock you at all if USC sitting there in November is in playoff contention?
No, they've got a pretty manageable schedule for the first month of the season. And then, they have that trip to Notre Dame in mid-October like they have every other year. So um, they could be 5-1, 6-0 heading into South Bend, and that could be a massive game. So you mentioned JUCO a little bit ago, and we're talking about USC. USC is in Los Angeles. I'm sure someone produced it, but can we get Last Chance of You back? I mean, come on.
Yeah, no kidding.
That show was awesome.
We
Let's
do
get
need it.
that.
We need. I used to, dude. I used to watch that every single year right before football season. It was like you had the SEC media days, because I know SEC media days gets a lot more attention than other like media days. And then after that, I would always watch. It was perfect. Last Chance U would always come out in August,
Oh, yeah.
kind of early August, right before football season would start, and it just give you all the feels for football season getting cranked up.
Number 8 in our post-spring Big Ten power rankings, the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Does Dylan Raiola get that second-year bump? He's going to be coached by none other than Dana Holgerson, the offensive coordinator for the Cornhuskers now. I absolutely love what Matt Rule did in the portal, bringing in guys like Dane Key at wide receiver from Kentucky, Rocco Spindler on the offensive line from Notre Dame, Elijah Pritchett from Alabama on the offensive line. Defensive side of the ball, Dason McCullough from Oklahoma, Williams Nwaneri, former 5-star defensive lineman out of Mizzou. There's pieces there that if Dylan Raiola would just play football, right, and stop trying to act like Patrick Mahomes Jr., if he just plays football and plays solid football, this could be another sneaky team. I think the Big Ten's got some serious depth this year. We're talking about teams number 7 and 8 with USC and Nebraska.
Yeah, because there's a couple teams that we haven't mentioned in our top 8 that are
Yeah.
also going to be solid football teams this year. And we'll get to a couple honorable mentions here in a second. But, I mean, so Raiola, I think Dylan Raiola gets a little bit of unfair criticism, to be honest with you. The guy was I know he was very high 5-star recruit coming out of high school. But you're talking about a guy that started as a true freshman in the Big Ten last year and played some of the best defenses in the country. And the dude had an offensive coordinator change in the middle of the season as a true freshman.
Yeah.
That's hard for a lot of people to overcome. He was solid. But the biggest thing for him is what you would expect from a true freshman starting in the Big Ten would be he had some turnover issues and took too many sacks. Just I've heard some people's biggest criticism of him has been that people thought he was going to be a lot more mobile.
He just kind of he just stands there. He doesn't seem to he's not freaking out at when the pocket collapses, but he just kind of is a little too stale in the pocket.
Yeah, just honestly trash pocket presence last year is the way to put it. But can that improve? I don't know. I'm not some big quarterback guru that can sit here and talk to you about pocket presence.
It almost just looks like a carelessness. I don't care what's going on. I'm trying to be calm and cool, but sometimes you're just a little too calm.
Yeah, but what I can tell you though is that Dana Holgerson, as far as a play caller overall in his career, has been incredible. Everywhere he's been, his offenses have produced. His offenses have put up points, have put up yards. His quarterbacks have thrown for a lot of yards. I would expect Raiola to, if he is the 5-star talent that we all think he is, I would expect him to progress quite a bit going forward, especially with the wide receiver help that you mentioned coming back. Having continuity with Holgerson as his OC, having some of those pieces up front on the offensive line. They were, again, pretty pitiful last year in the sacks given up category. Some of that was Raiola's fault. Some of that was the offensive line's fault. But with the additions on the offensive line, continuity at offensive coordinator, I expect the Nebraska offense to take a step forward. And, hey, man, the old saying, year 3, Matt Rule.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at Matt Rule's history, everywhere he's gone, it's been a turnaround job. Let's not talk about the NFL. That's a completely different animal from college football to begin with. It is. But his tenure at Temple and then at Baylor and now here at Nebraska, I think Nebraska fans should expect a pretty substantial leap forward this year for the Huskers. We're sitting here in the spring, man. Everybody, it's like the old spring propaganda. Everybody's excited about their teams going into the season. Everybody thinks their team has a chance to do special things. But I do think that this Nebraska team has the pieces and the talent, and with Raiola coming back, that they could be, solid and make some noise in the Big Ten this year. But what do you think on the defensive side? Losing their defensive coordinator, Tony White, at Florida State.
Yeah, and
I had him.
what's
I had him listed last year as one of the top 10, defensive coordinators in college football for how good he was at Syracuse and how good he was at Nebraska. And
Yeah.
for the first 2 years at Nebraska, their defense was solid as a rock under Tony White.
Yeah, and what were the guys' names on the front line? The polar bear, was that right? One of the guys?
Oh yeah, the polar bear and God, I can't remember the other one. Yeah, I mean, like Ty Robinson was
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
I can't, but they both obviously went in the draft and were really solid.
Yeah.
Anchoring down that defensive line. But their new defensive coordinator is John Butler. He was the DB's coach last year for Nebraska and passing game coordinators on the defensive side. He spent 7 years with the Buffalo Bills before that, and then he spent 3 years with the Houston Texans on old Billy OB staff with the Texans.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was Bill O'Brien's defensive coordinator at Penn State. And Bill O'Brien took him with him to the Houston Texans. So long-time journeyman. He's got defensive coordinator, experience in his past, NFL background. I just don't know, obviously, with him being now the primary play caller of the defense going forward. He was the DC in their bowl game against Boston College. But you got to think, man, Matt Rule has had a history of his tenure as a coach in college while at Baylor, even now so at Nebraska, of putting a really good staff around him. This is a Matt Rule trust factor for me, that the guy he hired, a defensive coordinator, is the right hire. So if John Butler can be anywhere near, he didn't have to be Tony White, but he could be anywhere near as good as Tony White, then the Huskers could be sitting there, one of those teams that's battling somewhere between that 8-win mark to 10-win mark. That's what we're talking about here with these teams that are kind of in that 5 to 8 to 9 range in the Big Ten. These teams are probably only going to be separated by 1 win in the win column. And you're looking at overall wins somewhere between that 8 to 10 range that some of these teams can get to.
Yeah.
And if Nebraska doesn't get to that 8 kind of plus win range, that's disappointing, man, in year 3 for Matt Rule.
Real quickly, you talked about some honorable mentions. We got a couple teams here that didn't make the cut for the top 8, but Washington with Jed Fish in his second year, Damon Williams at quarterback, Denzel Boston, wide receiver there, is kind of being slept on. I don't know if it's because Washington's up in the P&W and they're not, getting the notoriety, the national love. Takario Davis on the defensive side of the ball, Jonah Coleman. I mean, Washington, they could take a sizable second-year jump under Jed Fish, similar to what he did at Arizona. And then another team, obviously, is Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes. They're trying it again. They're going with another quarterback, Mark Gronowski, and they're going to see, if he can produce some, better offense. They got better offense last year than in 2023. But the story with Iowa is always their defense, man, and they are returning a ton on that defense. Nothing but juniors and seniors and graduate guys, so it's an older defense, and they're going to be a force to be reckoned with, as always.
Yep, I agree, man. I think that Washington has one of the more dynamic backfields in the country with dual threat quarterback Damon Williams and Jonah Coleman coming back. I mean, Coleman's been really good production-wise at Arizona, and then when he transferred to Washington last year, he was very productive again. I agree. But Kirk Ferentz in Iowa, they're going to be solid like they always are. And another one I'm going to mention here in the honorable mention is Minnesota. Row the boat and PJ Fleck. They literally, like I said, going into last year, they were one of those teams that I expected to take a leap forward. They did. They cashed my season win total over for me last year because PJ Fleck has only had one bad year as a head coach. And that was a couple of years ago. So with what they've got coming back, one of the best running backs in the Big Ten, and Darius Taylor, with what they've got coming back, they lost their defensive coordinator, Corey Heatherman, to Miami. But I think that would it shock you at all to see Iowa, Washington, or Minnesota to, again, be somewhere in that 8, kind of 9-win range, that 8-win range at the end of the year?
Not at all.
No, me either. So, again, that's what I know some people are going to be like, how can you have so-and-so ranked ahead of so-and-so in your power rankings? If you really look at it, again, team 6 on our list and an honorable mention team on our list, we're talking about one game in the win column is really the difference in that. Especially in these super conferences where we're going to have about 7 teams probably tied at the end of the year and tiebreakers decide who finishes ahead of who. But good stuff, man. I mean, I know Big Ten last year took a big step forward, and some people think that they might be better than the SEC now, whatnot. It's a conversation for another day, but it should be a big time year for the Big Ten again going into this year.
Stay tuned for our next episode. We got one more conference to go, and it will be a doozy because America's Conference, the Big 12 Conference, I mean, we'll put out some power rankings, but they may have 6 teams finish the regular season this year that weren't even in our top 8. I mean, that's just how crazy that conference is. So stay tuned next episode for the Big 12 Conference, and then we'll round everything out in a couple of weeks with our post-spring national rankings. So again, thank you guys for tuning in. Once again, share and like the episode. Give us a rating on Spotify and Apple and YouTube. Comment where you think we were right, where you think we were wrong. So we appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time.